series where we invite guests who don't just think outside the box, they redefine the definition of the very box and become pioneers in their field, just like Sir Isaac Newton did.
So today we are joined by Toby Negrin, who is currently the Chief Product Officer of the Wikimedia Foundation, with nearly 20 years of experience of integrating data, research, and design. He has been instrumental in producing products that we love and admire. So Toby joined the foundation in 2013 as the Director of Analytics, and slowly he rose to Senior Director, Head of Reading, and Interim Vice President of Product before his current appointment in November 2017. So welcome, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we pass the mic over to you, I'd like to just tell the participants, if you have any queries or questions, feel free to drop them in the chat box. And yeah, without further ado, over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Ipsanandri. It's really great to be here and welcome everybody who's on the call. I'm super excited. Good evening in Calicut or wherever you're joining from. I'm Toby Negrin, Chief Product Officer at the Wikimedia Foundation. So as the Chief Product Officer, I lead one of the largest departments within the Wikimedia Foundation, which is the global nonprofit that runs Wikipedia and a lot of other sites that hopefully you've seen and used. I have several team members who are based in India and Bangladesh, and I've heard from them about how difficult the situation is in South Asia at the moment. And I do want to acknowledge the impact of COVID-19 that you and your families may be going through. It's one of the reasons why I believe the work that we do at Wikimedia is so important, so that people have access to information in moments of crisis when they need it most. And if you all are interested, I can talk more about our work to support the local volunteer and staff communities in India. So a little bit more about me and what I do. My team supports this sprawling collection of volunteer-run projects dedicated to free knowledge. We support sites that are seen by more than 1 billion people each month. Wikipedia alone has 55 million articles across more than 300 languages. That's more languages than anyone else supports, from Google to the UN. Wikipedia started 20 years ago in January 2001. This year, we're actually celebrating our 20th birthday. And over those past 2 decades, Wikipedia has grown from more than a free encyclopedia on the internet. It powers how so many of us around the world find information and learn about new topics. It covers both breaking news and centuries-old history. And we do all of this in collaboration with communities of volunteers around the world. Because of this enormous scope, my work is quite different from the traditional approach to product development. Wikipedia is both a social and a technological institution. This means that my team is constantly thinking about technology in a way that aligns with our values. So I like to say it's product development with a mission. So what does this mean in practice? To paraphrase a well-known quote, technology is not neutral. At the beginning of my career, when I was about your age and entering the workforce for the first time, the overarching belief was the opposite. We operated under the belief that technology was neutral. The systems and technical tools we built couldn't be objectively good or bad, they just were. It was not our problem as technologists what these tools ended up being used for. Now, we know better. Over the past 2 decades, we've seen the enormous and lasting impacts of daily technology use in our lives. We need to consider the potential uses and exploitations of our work. We must constantly interrogate our own biases and how they are being embedded into what we build. We must expand our perceptions of user behavior. Above all, we need to be intentional about the impact that our technology is having on the world. As builders, creators, and engineers, this is our responsibility. So at the Foundation, we try to build tools that align with our core values. Everybody can participate, and that all of our decisions are transparent and open. And I'm going to share with you 3 areas where my team is focused on bringing that responsibility to the tools we create for the Wikimedia community. Artificial intelligence tools that help scale the work that we in our communities do. Bots that automate some of the analytics and monitoring functions in our projects. Finally, support for apps and new devices used in regions where we're trying to bring in new users to bring their knowledge to the projects. To the first point, our approach to AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning is centered on humans in the loop, where the technology augments and supports human decision-making, but doesn't replace it. Content on Wikipedia is never written automatically by AI tools. Instead, we use AI to help our volunteer editors determine where to spend their time. For example, AI can flag potentially incorrect or low quality edits that need to be reviewed by our editors very quickly. We're also very transparent about where we use AI tools. This is important because biases within AI can directly impact our users. Consider tools that are trained using limited data sets that represent only one part of the population, such as photographic collections of politicians that only feature male politicians. These biases will find their way into the algorithms and will affect the decisions made by the AI. And so ethical product development requires us to think about the biases that are inherent in the tools that we build and the data sets that we use to train them. In addition to these AI tools, developers often create bots on Wikimedia projects to scale the work of our editors. In recent years, we've seen a tremendous rise in misinformation across the internet globally. So how can an encyclopedia written entirely by volunteers keep up? Well, over the past 20 years since Wikipedia was created, our volunteers have created policies to help sort fact from fiction. Every edit must be cited back to reliable sources, and articles must be written from a neutral point of view without amplifying one perspective over another. My team supports this work by developing technical tools to help combat misinformation. For example, we've created tools that build a feed of real-time edits that Wikipedians can review, as well as bots that can flag the suspicious edits I talked about earlier for additional review before they're published. In each case, bots give the humans clues and help prioritize their time. They don't replace human decision-making, but they help scale human decisions. Another great example of ethical product development is our approach to translating content on our projects. Because of the nuances in local language and local contexts, we do not have fully automatic tools to translate information across languages. We always have humans in the loop. We support many more languages than Google and Yandex do, and for many of them, there's no translation at all. So in order to support bringing articles from one language into another, we rely on the editors to check each other, just as we do with the other editing. In addition, every new language is checked by the Volunteer Language Committee, which includes several linguists and experts in internationalization standard. Our content translations tools also use machine translation combined with human input to review and translate articles across hundreds of languages. To date, volunteers have used this content translation tool to translate over 900,000 articles, which makes it, I think, in the top 20 of Wikipedias. And this includes translating over 7,500 articles from other languages into Malayalam and 15,000 articles into Bengali, for example. Finally, since Wikipedia readers and editors come from all over the world, it's really important to me that my team develops our projects with a global perspective. This doesn't mean just having a few engineers in different locations. We need to have a globally dispersed product team. We need to rely on their insights to customize our work for local needs in different regions. For example, late last year, we introduced the first Wikipedia app specifically for iOS devices, smart feature phones that are used by millions of first-time internet users throughout India and Africa. We built this app to allow new people to access Wikipedia and to do so not in just English, but in more than 100 languages. The app for iOS was created by a team of our engineers who are based in the communities where iOS devices are used, primarily in Africa and Asia. They're able to do user testing with the local communities to understand and build for their specific needs. So as the Wikimedia Foundation, our responsibility is to build an internet that is more equitable, to create online spaces that are more representative of all people. It's not just about providing people with access to knowledge, but it's giving them the tools and the power to participate. Wikipedia and our projects allow you to bring your local perspective into the public sphere. Our goal is to invite more people to join our movement, whether that is editing a Wikipedia article, working on new tools, or joining our team at the foundation. I'd encourage you to think about the problems and the opportunities that you'll want to tackle as you leave university. You will all be builders of the future of the internet. Keep in mind, it's not just about the technical skills and the knowledge you learn here at university. You will also be bringing your experience and your perspectives to this work. As technologists, as engineers, the things that you build have a tremendous impact on society. And so you have a responsibility to ensure that that impact is a positive one. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation and hear from all of you.
Thank you, sir. So, like you talked to us about having a mission, like to have an idea, to know what the end result is, and have like producing a technology based on that. And that is something that we need right now. Like our generation requires it, like not just an aimless technology, but to have an end idea of what should be. And that's actually a very great piece of advice. And when we talk about Wikipedia, it's like a was network of information. You just get anything anyone, I mean, like you just get anything that you need. So everybody has this doubt of like, since anybody can access it, anybody can add on to it, we all have that doubt of like, is there a chance of misinformation being spread, or like is there like biases in the article or stuff like that. And you explained about like how it is tackled. I think that is one doubt, one question that we received over here right now. So that was included in your answer as well. And now I think after listening to all of that, most of us have a lot of questions to ask you to get to know you and your work better. So I guess let's move on to the first question.
Awesome, let's do it.
Okay.
Yeah. Well,
So
actually, Sri, let me say one thing about how our communities work and sort of how we make sure that the encyclopedia doesn't have misinformation in it. And I think what's really important is that the communities themselves have agreed about how information makes it into the encyclopedia, and I think that's really important.
mhm,
But one interesting challenge is that it's very much based on having sources on the internet that support one factor or another. And so for some languages, there just isn't a lot of, there's just not a lot of content on the internet. And so that's something that some of our projects also address. We have a project on called Wikisource that volunteers in India use to digitize written texts. And that is actually creating these primary sources on the internet that people can use to make sure that the encyclopedia articles are correct.
okay. So since you have a lot of what do you say? A lot of things to achieve in a day. You have a team that is working that has a lot of that needs to take care of a lot of things. So in short, or like you're very curious to know this, what does a day in your life look like?
So this is actually like a really important, this is a super important question, I think, for everybody, whether you're just starting out or whether you've been around for a while, because where you spend your time is really what you think is important, right? Like we all have to-do lists, we all have lists of things we want to do, books we want to read, but it's the things that you actually do that demonstrate what's important to you. And so I think it's really important to sort of begin the day and make sure that you have a little bit of a plan. You have a few things that you want to accomplish, and you can really focus on those. Um, and so for me, as a department head, I'm really responsible for three things: strategy of the department. And so this means that I'm often thinking about like future trends in technology. I might be reading, I might be talking to people, and just sort of thinking about the future. The second thing that I'm responsible for, and this might be most important, is culture, right? How we treat each other. And so one of the things that we're really looking at in our teams, especially during the pandemic, is do people feel supported by Wikimedia? Do people have the resources they need to do their jobs? And sorry, it's morning here in California, so there's a little background noise. Um, and then finally, the last thing that I think about is operations. Like, how are we actually doing the work? Are we meeting our deadlines? Are we doing things in the right way? So, sort of within these three areas, what I actually think about, and this is one of the things I love about the job, is like just to support these things, I might be thinking about a new JavaScript framework. I might be looking at scaling our databases. I might be reading user research, people all over the world. I might be thinking about intermediary liability in the States or in India. So, but the really important thing is just to make sure you've got a plan and you try to sort of check some of those boxes.
Like a productive morning means a productive day.
Yes. I have a lot
Okay.
of meetings. That I have a lot of meetings too. This is sort of as like that like I have to connect with the people on my team. I have to make sure that they understand that I support them and things like that.
Sure. Okay, so you've had experience working in startups like in Sweden and Netherlands, and you've also had a working in big organizations like Yahoo and DNA. So, what has been the biggest lesson that you have learned from each?
So I think with startups, um, it's to really, I'll probably say focus is part of every single answer I give, but with startups, it's about focusing on like the problem that you need to solve, which is usually like the value that you're creating for your users, right? And you really need to just, part of the art of it is you just really need to figure out exactly what that thing is, because with startups you don't have a lot of time, you generally don't have a lot of money, and you're trying to get things to market as quickly as possible. So one thing that I see people do is, like, for example, like they worry about scaling the database before they have any users. And it's like, you don't worry about scaling the database, worry about solving your users' problems. And if you have to scale the database later, that's okay, because sometimes you just have to really focus on the value that you're creating, and not worrying about everything else. And I think with startups too, you really have to be like, you have to listen to your users. You have to be really flexible. You'll have an idea, but your idea might be wrong, and you have to be able to have the humility to be like, okay, I thought this was going to work, it's not working, let's try something else.
Mm.
Big companies, you actually want to bring those startup values to the big companies, but often the problems that you're focusing on are the problems that you created in the startup. So you
Okay.
have a successful product, and you actually, now you have to worry about scaling the database, you have to worry about costs, you have to worry about these things. But the balance is right, like, you're having huge impact in the world. If you're in a big company like at Yahoo, we reached, hundreds of millions of people. At Wikimedia, we reach billions of people. Like, just everything that you do is hugely amplified, and so that's really the reward there. And I think just, one thing that cuts across all of these things is it really comes down to people, and how you treat your team, how you interact with people, how you care about your users. Like that doesn't change.
Mm. Like how you
Actually, I
manage.
think that's a really interesting perspective that you brought in. So I think what we really want to know is what brought you to Wikipedia and what made you, stick around, what made you want to continue doing the work that you're doing in the company.
Yeah, that's a great question. Sometimes, I heard this great quote. I think a famous philosopher said it, but I can't remember who it was. Like, life, you lead your life moving forward, but you can only understand it looking backwards. So sometimes you make decisions, and only after you've made them do you really sort of get to understand why they were important to you. So like my bio said, like most of my career, I spent really focusing on technology at startups and then at larger companies as I got older. And if you had asked me when I joined the Wikimedia Foundation if I would still be there 8 years later, I would have said no. Because what I thought would happen was, I thought that,
Oh,
yeah. So what I thought would happen is that I'd work for the foundation for a year and a half, sort of help solve their analytics problems, sort of feel good
mm,
about myself, get clean, and then go back to corporate life. But I didn't, and there were two reasons why I stayed. The first is that I found that the mission was just really awesome and really invigorating. Like, it really helped, I think, help me understand the impact of the work. I saw it was my first nonprofit, and I really like that part of it. It sort of makes it all worthwhile. Second thing, and I talked a little bit about this with Shri, was like, this is the most interesting job on the planet. Like, we like to say when something happens in the world, it happens on Wikipedia. And so even though you have to be focused, you have to have a plan, the number of different things that I get to think about is super interesting. And I'm sort of the kind of person that I like, I don't like to be bored.
okay. So if we check out your LinkedIn page, like it's very clear that you have made a lot of contributions to the Wikimedia Foundation. So what is your favorite project that you have worked on?
Yeah, I think I think my favorite project was a project that was actually a test and a prototype that we actually don't have anymore. And so I'll tell you that story. So the Wikimedia Foundation is very popular in the States and Western Europe and actually Japan, but use in the rest of the world isn't the same. Like people use it, but not at the same level. And so for a long time, we've really wanted to help, close this gap. And one of the things that we realized at some point was that we weren't going to be able to build experiences for the rest of the world from San Francisco, right? Like it's just different. The context is different. It's not better or worse. It's different. And so we said, okay, we're actually going to move this development to we're going to distribute it across the world. And so one of the first things that we did was we went to India, we went to Bangalore and did a design sprint with a local design company. And that was really, and so a design sprint, for those of you who don't know, is you take 5 days, you start with an idea, you do research, you talk to your users, and by the fifth day, you have to have a prototype. And
Wow.
so yeah, so it's a really cool way of sort of getting that focus I talked about with the startup, right? Like you've just got to make decisions. And that is actually like it's a little scary at first, but it's really fun. It actually turns out to be really fun. So we figured out a couple things about our users in India. And the first thing was that in the States, people primarily speak English all the time for everything. But in India, and this will sound super obvious to all of you, so apologies, people live in a number of different languages every day. And one of the things that was really interesting to me as an American was that Indian people might talk about different things in different languages. And I thought that was I thought that was really fascinating. For my African colleague, she was from Nairobi. This was also completely obvious to her. She was like, "Yeah, of course," because she spoke three languages. So that was like super interesting. So we ended up deciding to build a multilingual site on a topic that was um, that was very relevant to many of our Indian users, and that was cricket. We later realized that it was mostly Indian men, and that was a miss. But in a design sprint, part of the goal is to learn, and one of the things that we learned was we need to build products that are attractive for everybody, usable for everybody. So we ended up building this site called cricketinfo.com. I believe it was around the Cricket World Cup, and we
Oh,
actually
great.
launched it.
Cricket
Yeah.
is pretty big in India.
Yes.
Yeah, like cricket unites India. Cricket unites India.
Yeah, that's awesome. And believe me, the people from Southeast Asia in the States, or at least in California, they play a lot of cricket too.
Okay.
Like actually one of the funny when I was at Yahoo, I came into the office and like all of my Indian and Pakistani colleagues, they were so tired. They all looked terrible. I was like, "What's up with you?" And India had played Pakistan in cricket that night. They'd watched it all night. No one had slept. So it's like, okay,
That's
this is
always a
really
tense
important.
match.
India versus Pakistan is a crazy match which nobody misses.
Yes. I mean, it was everyone was friends at Yahoo, but yes, there was definitely some emotions around that match. So we built this site, and it really helped us learn a couple of things about how people used Wikipedia, how people used it really helped us focus on languages. It really felt focus on like being able to switch between languages. Um, and we set the site up for a while. We got some people from Facebook and other folks to visit it. We learned some things, and then we turned it off, and it doesn't exist anymore because we didn't want to have to support it. And so I think that project really for sort of really understanding how people use your product, um, coming up with a quick experiment that you can use to learn, and then being able to turn it off, but take those learnings and bring them into your core product. That I think that was a really good process.
So, is there any exciting project that you're working on right now?
So one of the challenges of working at a big company is you have lots of sort of existing projects that you're working on. You're trying to make better, and sort of finding a balance between, keeping the existing stuff up to date and doing new stuff is actually it's a big challenge at big companies. So I'm going to tell you two projects that I'm really excited about. The first one is we have a project for new users, which we call growth. That's a term that everybody uses. And so what this project is focused on is making it easier for new users to edit Wikipedia. Because I don't know if you've ever tried to edit Wikipedia, it can be a little intimidating. There's an article, you press the edit button, and you can anything you want, you can write. And and it's going to be read by millions of people, so it kind of feels like you got to get it right, and then there are a lot of rules, and there's this and that, and it's just like, okay, I'm not really sure how to do this. And so we were trying to think, okay, how can we make this more welcoming to newcomers? And there are really two problems, right? The first is sort of you get this big wall of text and you'd have no idea what to do. But the second is, like, there are all these rules and it's not really clear what to do. So our team thought a lot about this. And what they did was they focused on something that we call structured contributions or micro tasks. And what that entails is looking at the editing process and actually breaking it down into different tasks that are easier to do. They sort of they're less intimidating, and they work better on your phone. So this is deployed on like 30 wikis worldwide. Like you can do things like add a picture to an article, correct a typo. I don't know. Have you used Duolingo? Is that an app? It's an app for learning languages. Yeah, it's an app for learning languages, and we really like that. And we're sort of trying to make editing Wikipedia sort of as easy and fun as learning a language with Duolingo. So yeah, we're starting to roll that out worldwide. Volunteers really like it. The communities really like it. So I think that's going to be, a really good way of bringing new people into the encyclopedia, helping them sort of, get the good feelings about contributing, and hopefully help them, sort of learn more about how to edit and continue. Because one of the coolest things about Wikipedia is, like, you edit it, you press publish, and then, like, people who are searching Google or getting links from their friends, they're reading your work, and that's super exciting. So we also have a project that is sort of very sort of aspirational, and actually may not work, but we feel the need. You need to do some experiments. No one thought Wikipedia would work when we started it, but we did it, and it did work. So this project is called Abstract Wikipedia, and the goal of Abstract Wikipedia is to introduce a new form of knowledge. So knowledge right now is text in Wikipedia. We have pictures. People on the internet use lots of videos. This new form of knowledge is code or functions, right? Where you can actually, like, write functions that, like, do different things, right? Like you could use it to convert Celsius to Fahrenheit, or do some math problems, or look up a population of a city from Wikidata, things like that. And what we want to use it for is we want people to write functions that take facts from our knowledge base Wikidata and convert them into articles in every language on the planet. So we don't think that Wikipedia has about 6 million articles in it in English. We think every language should have 6 million articles. Okay. And so so it's a little bit abstract. It's a little bit weird, a little bit hard to understand. But sometimes you just have to try these things. You have to take some chances. And one of the things that's really exciting is once we get it launched, and we're launching the first part of it this year, we think the volunteers will take it and do things with it that we could never think of, and that is really exciting.
That really sounds good. Also, like, it's very new. Like, people wouldn't think of it that easily. It's very new and exciting.
Totally, and it actually turns out it's hard to explain
Yes.
too, right? Like part of our user research is about saying, okay, like we're all technical people, we sort of understand these things, but how do you actually explain to like a regular smart person what a function is and what you can do with it? And more importantly, how can you build a UI that helps people actually create and share these functions? It's cool problems.
Yeah.
Also, with Wikimedia, like it's always trying to reach out to people of different backgrounds. Like you said, your website is in various different languages. So most major websites would support maybe an average of like 50 languages, but Wikipedia offers like 300 or more. So something that would come to my mind is, certain words get lost in translation. Some languages may not have the right words. So how do you tackle those kind of situations?
Ooh, that's a cool question. Um, so I think that the way that we handle it is by making sure that the volunteers are that so we make sure that there are enough volunteers in the language in a specific language so that they can make sure that they can check all of the articles. Like it's a sort of a very natural thing for someone reading Wikipedia who's an editor, like they'll be reading about something, they'll see a mistake or they're seeing something that can be clarified. They click at it, they fix it, save, and then it's done and then it's updated. Because the volunteers, even though like you see a Wikipedia article and you're like, okay, this is like done, the articles are never really done, right? You can always sort of make them clearer or better, or of course things change and their new knowledge is discovered. Um, so there's just making sure that there are enough volunteers and working with the local communities to make sure that we help them recruit. One of the things that we're actually using the growth features that I talked about is actually sort of identifying, we actually use AI to identify some of these issues and give it to new volunteers because this is something that could potentially be really, really, really easy to do. So I think, we almost always think about these things in terms of a social element and a technological element and how we can bring these things together to solve problems. But I think, it's actually kind of a cool problem in the sense like there are languages that are spoken all over the world, right? Like English, Spanish. I'm sure that like, and so these languages have like deviated over the centuries, and I'm sure for some of the Indic languages that's happened too. And so sometimes the editors have to actually have a good discussion about what's the right spelling to use or what's the right word to use.
So going more into your role at Wikipedia as a chief product officer, it's you and your team's duty to ensure that, like, if you have an idea for a feature or a tool or any project, how does it develop from an idea into an actual product? Like, what are the steps involved in product development?
So the first thing that we want to do is we really want to make sure that it's aligned with our strategic goals. And so we have a strategy that we want to get more contributors in emerging communities. And so the ideas that we're thinking about need to be aligned with this strategy, right? Like for Wikipedia, there's so many different things you could do. Um, you really have to have ways you really have ways to find that focus that I'm always going to talk about. Um, but what this means is like if someone comes with like, a really good idea of how to make like the reading experience better. And we might say that's a great idea, but we're not going to do that this year because we're focused on something else. Right. So the first thing is sort of you have to have that strategic alignment. You have to be um, aligned with the plan. Um, the second thing that you need before you sort of get started is you need to have a hypothesis. And what that means is you need to have a theory about how what you're doing is going to actually work, right? So if your goal is to recruit new contributors, you need to have a theory about where to find new contributors, how to get them onboarded, how to help them get value from what they're doing. So you sort of have to sort of think about it. And then you want to start experimenting. right? Then you start trying to understand if various ideas that you have will actually prove your hypothesis. And so this goes to things like design. So what you want to do here is you want to be quick and fast and learn, right? And so the design sprint I was talking about was all about like that experimental stage. Like do it fast, learn some things, and be ready, frankly, be ready to leave things behind that aren't working. So once you've done all these things, then you can actually start building, right? And that, maybe that, it's the fun part, but often people do it too soon, and then you end up solving a problem that people didn't really have. And then you can always learn something, but you probably wasted some time. So you really want to have those things done. You really want to have sort of that hypothesis, various solutions in your head. And then when you start building, and so we use at the foundation, we use agile methodology or lean methodology that I'm sure is pretty familiar now. It's pretty old. But what that means is you just focus on very small increments of user value. And so at the end of every sprint, which can be, a week, 2 weeks, a month, you want to make sure that you actually have something that your users can use and experiment on, right? Because that, going back to being quick and focused, that's lets you learn as quickly as possible. So we call that iterating, right? And
Okay.
you iterate until you find something that really works, and then you start scaling it out. But I think, the thing to remember is like you don't start building until you have at least some ideas and some hypothesis that you can test.
So it's like you have a mission, you want something, and you build according to that. Like you build a technology which answers that, which solves that, and then you move forward with it. So you look for the first thing and you build up an idea, and then you see if that works, and you try your best if that works. Otherwise, go to the next plan. Like keep experimenting.
Yeah, do it quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, do it quickly. And don't often people who are just getting started, they'll just be like, I have this great idea. And you'll build it and it's not a good idea, and the users don't use it, right? And you have to be humble enough to be like, okay, that's not right. What can I learn? Sometimes we see people getting angry at the users. Why don't they use my tool? Why don't they use my product? And it's, you have to be humble.
Okay, so like you've talked about a lot of amazing projects, and you and your team have worked a lot extensively on Wikidata. So would you like to tell us a bit about that?
Totally. So Wikidata is an open knowledge base that the movement has created. And one interesting thing about Wikibase was like this was like Wikidata. 8 years ago, this was an experiment, and we actually had it built by our German affiliate. And so it's actually built by a different team in Germany.
Wow.
We work with them very closely, yeah. And so one of the reasons that we did this was because if you have like a new project and like abstract Wikipedia is like this, but you're building it next to like your existing product, it's often hard for people to, pay attention to it because everyone's focused on Wikipedia. So you have to sort of have to take some care there. So Wikidata is a global open knowledge base. And it's actually kind of hard to explain what that is. And actually, Nadine and I have spent some time trying to explain it. And the best thing that we can come up with right now is it's Wikipedia for machines, right? It is actually a set of rules around the world about the world that machines can use to reason about it. And so there are lots of things that people actually use this for. The first time that I actually heard the first time that I heard about someone using it, and this was a long time ago, was they were writing a program that digitized menus for restaurants in Silicon Valley. And it turns out that you need something called an entity store, a knowledge base, to actually help decode all the different types of food on the menu. Like you actually have to be able to map those back to topics a computer can understand so that you can like do things with them, right? And this, I was just like, wow, that's interesting, but it's just a menu. But it turns out like, things like Alexa, right, that answer questions about the world use Wikidata to answer questions because it's
Mm.
really the only way they can do it. And so just to get technical with it, one of the problems with building these kinds of knowledge taxonomies is it's very difficult. Like it's very difficult to set up the taxonomy. Like there's lots of different, like there's lots of debates about sort of the relations of different entities to each other. And so what a lot of people do is they try to set up this taxonomy first. Wikidata didn't do that. Wikidata said good enough is good enough. And so they just started building and they just started assembling the data so that the taxonomy is a little bit messy. But by relaxing that constraint, they're able to get a lot more knowledge into the knowledge base. And I think that's another really sort of good general example of sometimes like relaxing constraints and really sort of examining like your core principles and saying, well, we don't really need to do this, can actually really sort of unlock really great things.
Yeah,
But you
like during this COVID-19 pandemic, like Wikidata has been really useful in giving information, like extremely useful in collecting and modeling useful information related to the pandemic.
So yeah, like she said, a lot of people refer to Wikipedia. I'm sure all of us did as a very trustworthy and reliable source for updates regarding the pandemic. And there were over like 532 million reads. So how did you manage to make sure that all your information was up to date?
um, I think that the best, it all comes back to making sure that the volunteers, the people who are actually doing the work, feel engaged and appreciated. And so, part of that is making sure that we support our communities, and we actually give away about 10% of the money that we raise. We actually give straight back to our volunteers, right, to fund different projects and things of that nature. But on the technical side, one of the really important things that we do is we make sure that Wikipedia is available everywhere and it's reasonably fast. And so this is like an example of like, what I was talking about earlier is a socio-technical solution, right? Like if you're if your thing is updating articles on lakes and rivers around the world, like that's your thing, you really like it, you spend a lot of time editing Wikipedia, and we do have the lakes and rivers people. They're actually a well-known group that we talk to. The best way for us to show that we appreciate their work and it's valued is by making sure that billions of people can read it quickly. And so we actually have a very sophisticated content delivery network infrastructure. We don't use other people's, we actually use our own to make sure that people around the world can access the content really quickly. Because like if you're putting all your time into writing the encyclopedia and then you go to the website and it's really slow or it looks bad or it's just not there, that's going to be really discouraging.
Yeah. So we all know that you joined the foundation as Director of Analytics. So could you tell us a little bit about data analytics and how user research contributes to our daily usage of Wikipedia?
Right. Great question. So the first thing that I want to say is that at Wikipedia, we take the value of privacy for our users very seriously. And so we actually don't keep track of what you read. We don't like have an individual entry in a database for specific people. We aggregate everything, we do some analysis, and then we throw it away. Like this is super important to us. And I think it's really one of the things that makes Wikipedia sort of stand out. And I think it's one of the ways that you can bring your values into your work in a very direct way. So, but we do use a lot of data. So a great example, I think everyone here probably knows what an A/B test is, right? Like where you test a different, you test you test one feature, one tweak against another to see which one users prefer. We do a lot of that. We probably do, maybe 5 of those every week. And so that would be an example of how we use like quantitative data to make
Mhm.
decisions, right? Like we record what people are doing, we put it in a database, we run some analysis, we say, okay, people liked feature A over feature B, we're going to deploy that to everybody. And I think that's pretty standard in the industry. One of the problems with just doing that is you only see the people who are already using your site, and you only see how they're reacting to your ideas. And so you're actually missing out on an incredible amount of information about your users, right? Like you just don't like you're basically only asking the people who are there if they like your ideas. And so you need to be able to balance this quantitative data with what we call qualitative data, right? And that's the user research. And so we actually generally try to put that at the beginning of the project rather than at the end, right? And so it's like going back to the hypothesis that I had. Like we might have a hypothesis, or we might say, okay, we want more people to edit Wikipedia. Let's go out, let's talk to Sri, let's talk to Afsana, let's talk to people, and just have a conversation about like why you might want to do this. What are some of the barriers? And just really try to understand like sort of what are the user needs, not just like I want to order food from the internet, but like what are the real like underlying motivations and desires people have, and how can we have the software meet that? And that's a lot of that is about the hypothesis. So there's sort of this like we kind of think of it as kind of thick data or integrated data, but you really need to have a combination of both. And it doesn't really need to be super fancy, right? Like we have teams that do this, but just, if you're doing your own projects, you can actually just go out and talk to your users, or you may be a user. You can think about yourself, right? You don't have to do this at big scale, but it is really important to talk to the people who you want to use your software and figure out what they're trying to do.
So there's another question that we love asking all our speakers. So we'd like to ask you as well, what are some books that you would recommend to us as must reads, like everyone has to read them?
Um, that's a great question. So, the book that I read most recently is Accelerate. Yeah, it's like it's backwards. I can send this out. Um, so Accelerate is basically the study of like it's a study about it's like a qualitative study of software developers and how they work. And one of the things that I really like about it is that it connects like the way the work is done to how people feel about their jobs, right? And I'll give you an example. So we really like as leaders, we really need to make sure that our teams are happy and that they have what they need and they feel good about their work. Just it's just really important part of management. And one of the things that Accelerate found was if your deployment process, like the way you get code, into production is stressful, guess who's going to be stressed? Developers, right? So part of the CI/CD like revolution and DevOps and everything is about making that deployment process easy, easy to roll back. So if you make a mistake or something happens, it's easy to get back to something that you know good, and that makes developers feel better about their job. It's not just about more profitable or better features or more users. It's really about how developers feel, and for me that really connected a lot of dots. Um, let's see, what are some other good ones? I'm also reading An Elegant Puzzle, which is one of the Stripe directors of engineering. So it's sort of like a how-to guide about how to build an engineering organization. Sort of going back in time, there is a book called Peopleware that if you want to see how people did things before you were born, um, it
Oh,
talks about that. But it has like just great things like one of the principles of peopleware is if a project is running late, you add more people to the project, it will make the project later. And this is because all these people have to learn about, they have to learn all this context, and they're going to slow the team down while they're learning. And so
Yeah.
things like this.
Okay, so do you customize your book? Like I saw like notepads and stuff inside Accelerate.
Oh yeah, I definitely, yeah, I put in the stickies. I keep notes. If I want to remember something, I really have to write it down. So I sort of make sure I
Okay.
do that. But yeah, that's actually a good trick. Like if you want to know if I've read something that's on my desk, like if there are stickies in it, I've read it. But
So,
yeah, I think that's actually, or actually just the book thing is really important. I think one of the pieces of advice that I got really early on in my career, which was really good, was just read, right? Just read them. Like back when we had manuals, read the manual. But like actually read about the thing. Be prepared. And I love that question about the books. Anyway, sorry.
so I really want to know if you had to describe Wikimedia and all that it stands for in just 3 words, what would they be?
Um, Community created knowledge.
It's amazing.
That's nice. So,
Yeah.
okay, so I guess we are reaching the end of the session. So, this is one question. So, Wikimedia has recently celebrated its 20th anniversary, and no doubt that has a major impact on our lives. Like, we see internet memes like someone on their graduation day would be like, "Thank you, mom, dad, and Wikipedia for helping me graduate." Exactly. So, what do you think, like, where Wikimedia will reach in the next 20 years? Like, what are your hopes and aspirations for the future?
So I want Wikipedia to be truly global, right? I mean, one of my aspirations is I really want all of the world's knowledge to be in Wikipedia and the other projects. Like it's primarily written, like I said, it's primarily written in the States, Western Europe. I want everybody to participate, and I want to really be able to read everybody's points of view. Like I think that's just one of the things that I really like, is just getting points of view from everywhere, and just having that full vision. So that's one thing. That's really important to me. The second thing that I think is important is I want Wikipedia to be to what's the best way to put this? I want it to keep up to date with the current trends on the internet. Like I really like Wikipedia right now is very textual. We need to add more media. We need to figure out, what does community curated video actually look like? How do we actually make that happen? Because I really don't want Wikipedia to become a museum. I want it to stay vibrant and stay current. In order to do that, we need to get more voices, but we also need to make sure that the experiences match how people are using the internet today and forever.
But I think, now Wikipedia is almost like embedded into our lives because
Yes.
we've grown up using Wikipedia. It's just easily available information on any topic. So anything you want to know about, you just click on the Wikipedia article and you read about it. And even for schoolwork, assignments, Wikipedia has got all the information that we need. And I think some of us can't imagine our lives without it. It's become a household name, and we really wouldn't be able to live without Wikipedia. So
That's awesome to hear. Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely brought the community, like you said. It's stayed true to its
Definition.
motto, I guess, of bringing the community together and really catering to what the community wants. So I think those are all the questions we have. It was great talking to you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to do this for us. It really means a lot. And yeah, we hope we can do something like this maybe in the future again.
I would love to. Thank you so much. It was really great to talk to you all. Thank you.
So that wraps up the 7th edition of Newton Speaks. Thank you, sir, for an amazing session. And thank you, everyone, for attending. I'm sure you all enjoyed the session, and we hope that you will join our future editions where we bring in yet another engaging speaker. Thank you and goodbye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, sir.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.